or, you know, if you're an informal educator, that folks can use it that way as well. Or if you're just any person and you want to learn more, you can go to these collections, watch these really short videos, do some activities. I had plan to also do a little bit of a demonstration to show how you can create your own hydrothermal vent. I'm not sure if you all are interested, but when we get to that section, if you want to watch me do it, you can. And then if you want to do some of that activity on your own or with your family, you know, we'll make sure that you get the instructions to do that as well. I'm an educator at heart, so it's definitely going to be leaning on the education side of things. But I will get started. So hopefully you can hear this.
In the dark of the deep ocean live creatures that could practically come from another world. They are fascinating, beautiful, and mysterious. They are so bizarre to us because they've evolved in an environment that is completely different from ours. With no air and no sunlight, it's almost as though they're living in outer space. In near complete darkness, many generate their own light to scare away predators, capture food, or attract mates. Some have gigantic eyes, or none at all, or senses that can feel electrical charges. Some have built-in lures that attract prey and teeth that bite and never let go. They may be weird, but they are also amazing. Join us in their world as we creep into the deep. Let's get started.
Okay. So, of course, you know, the deep sea is characterized by the distance that the sunlight travels through the water. And so at sea level and in the sunlight zone, it is from sea level to about 200 meters. Sunlight rarely penetrates beyond that zone. After that zone, you'll go. Okay. I just wanted to make sure that I wasn't getting feedback or that someone didn't have a question. So after that zone, we will go into the twilight zone, called the twilight zone because sunlight decreases with depth here. So you aren't getting as much sunlight, but you do get some in this area. Since there is not much sunlight that comes into the twilight zone, photosynthesis is not possible. And then, of course, the midnight zone. This is where there is no sunlight at all. This zone is just completely characterized by darkness. You can see some examples of the types of organisms that live in each of these zones. And what we're going to do is kind of go through each level, and we'll talk about some of the organisms that live in the sunlight, twilight, and midnight zone and their adaptations. So what is the deep sea? It's about 200 meters to the ocean floor. The conditions, of course, is that it's cold, right? The pressure, there we go. There's difference in pressure, definitely really dark. Organisms are scarce and hard to come by, which is why it's really important that the ones that do live there are able to obtain their prey easily or to hide from predators easily. And those are some of the adaptations that we'll definitely be going through. Okay, so as we explore the deep ocean, there are different ways that scientists can explore the deep ocean. They usually use ROVs. Sometimes they do go on missions, of course, and at other times they might send like a robot down, and then from land they will be having folks kind of look at the video footage. And a lot of times you can watch these expeditions happen in a normal year. You can watch those expeditions happen from the Okeanos on NOAA's website. So we're going to just take a little bit of a look at some of the footage that they have gotten from the ocean floor.
marine science, the deep ocean is where the planet keeps its most hidden secrets. The ocean covers 2/3 of our planet, but we know more about Mars than the deep seas. Why is it important for us to explore the ocean? What new discoveries await scientists who dare to dive deep? Remotely operated vehicles from NOAA's research ships find whole new worlds of bizarre creatures in alien ecosystems. Some that might be crucial habitats for seafood species. Some that could teach us how life could survive on other planets. And all that exists at depths and pressures that would crush a human being. It takes cutting-edge technology, coordination, and a daring spirit. But the payoff is being part of the exploration of Earth's last frontier. Come with us as we shine some light on what's being found in the deep, deep sea. Let's get started.
So I think I saw a question about like how deep is the ocean on average? And on average is about 2.3 miles, which is 1,200 feet. 12,000 feet. But of course, in different areas, that changes, right? You know, it can be much deeper, like in the Marianas Trench, or it can be more shallow. And so one thing that's really cool is that, like, in that video, they were talking about, like, you know, studying the Earth's last frontier. And we actually, I worked with NOAA on a deep ocean show that we're going to do on Friday. And one of the things that we're talking about is we're going to have a guest from NASA, and they are partnering with NOAA to see how NOAA studies the bottom of the ocean, how they study the ocean floor, and the things that we've learned from that process. And they apply that then to studying space and studying the rest of the universe. It's a really fascinating kind of look at it, but really what we're trying to do, and what NOAA and NASA are trying to do, is use what we learned here on Earth and apply that to how we might be able to go into space, because a lot of the conditions are the same. A lot of them, you know, a lot of the planets, like Europa is one of the ones that they've been talking about a lot, is where, you know, they would be able to, they know that there is an ocean there, and they are trying to find out if there's life there. And if so, you know, what does that life look like? How does it survive? You know, if it's not surviving on oxygen, how does it, you know, get its energy? So there are a lot of similarities between the deep ocean and space, and how we explore those things, and how we better understand the organisms that live there, which I think is fascinating. So we're going to go into the sunlight zone. And so in the sunlight zone, you can just see that this is just a pretty simple graphic, right, to show how deep most of these types of water are. So of course, ocean water, right, that's going down to about 200 meters, coastal water, right, and then water in estuaries are less than about 50 meters. And then as you go down the water column, you see what types of organisms are living within the water. And across the top, you see how light is penetrating in the water. And this is, I think, something really cool, because we're going to learn a little bit later as we get deeper into the ocean. We'll see how and why there are a significant number of organisms that have red on their bodies. They might appear black, but they have red on their bodies in the deep ocean. So in the sunlight zone, we're talking about, of course, phytoplankton. Phytoplankton are so common. They're very small, but of course they perform photosynthesis. And it's a really, really great fact to know that phytoplankton produce half of the air we breathe. So, like, a lot of times when we work with students, we told them to, you know, like, take one breath and take another breath, and you know, one of those breaths that you had taken, that has come from phytoplankton. They were able to produce the oxygen for us. So we get more oxygen from marine life, from phytoplankton, than we do from the trees on land, which I think is insane, you know, to think about just how much phytoplankton we have to have in the world for that to be true. Of course, this is just talking about, you know, I can't see the chat all the time. I wish I could. I see so many comments coming in, and I'm trying to like check because I want to talk as you are putting comments in. So of course, the the just want to make sure that I'm getting to the types of questions that you all have. So thanks, Christina. Appreciate that too. I'll share some of some more information, and then I'll make sure I get to all of the stuff that everyone is asking. I'll try my best at least. So we are now in the twilight zone, and we're going to look at some of the organisms that live in this zone and their adaptations, the way they look, the way they're able to survive here. So this first one is called the basket star.
This creature was found 1,800 feet deep in the ocean. It's called a basket star. This extraordinary invertebrate has a mass of twisting and turning arms that can measure 1 meter long. Each branch has tiny, sharp hooks, allowing the creature to capture prey. It feasts mainly on zooplankton. Basket stars are able to grow their limbs back if they are broken or chopped off by predators. An ability as freakish as it is amazing.
So of course we know that that characteristic, right, is true of many sea stars, right? Regeneration, they're able to, you know, grow back any of their arms. Might be slow, might not grow back the same size, but they are able to do that. And so we see the same thing happening in the basket star. I wanted to go to next. Okay. So we see the same thing happening in the basket star. Next, of course, we're going to talk about the sperm whale. So the sperm whale is one of the sperm whale is very interesting because it can be found in this zone, but it can dive very deeply. So the sperm whale they are one of the largest toothed whales. They are carnivores, and they are about 16 meters. So that's pretty big. But you can see its eyes right there, and there'll be another photo of a sperm whale just a little bit later so that you can learn a little bit more about them. But sperm whales can dive pretty deep. Then we have the telescope fish. Now this one is really cool. Obviously we know why it's called the telescope fish. Look at it, and those eyes look like you're peering through a telescope. So they're about 20 centimeters. To give you some context, that's about half as tall as a bowling pin. Half as tall as a bowling pin. So it looks really scary, but it's tiny. And this is what we're going to see with a lot of these organisms. They're going to look probably a little scary or very scary, right? You might feel like you never want to come in contact with them, but they're going to be so small. And in context, you might be like, you know, why would I ever be afraid of this? In real life, we probably would not be close to any of these organisms. I don't plan on being close to them at all since they live so deep in the water, but it's still fun to kind of think about, you know, what would you do if you came in contact with them? And this is the Halloween themed naturalist hour. So it's a little scary, of course. So the telescope fish, you know, of course, they can hang vertically in the water column in order to spot prey species that pass above them. So that's really cool. That's one thing that they're able to do. You can kind of see that their body looks really dark. It looks black or even translucent in some areas. You can see those teeth. So that lets us know, of course, that it is a carnivore. Very cool fish in the twilight zone. The giant hatchet fish, this fish uses photophores, so it has this area here that helps it with counter illumination, which means that like when something is looking above it, it'll be dark, and then underneath it'll be really it'll be lit, and it'll draw prey towards them. So deep sea hatchetfish use their photophores on the underside for counter illumination. And a lot of counter shading occurs in some other species of fish, like in sharks, for example. A lot of sharks have exhibit counter shading, and so like the top of them will be dark, but the bottom will be white, and that's so that if there is something underneath of them, like maybe a larger shark, for example, if they look up, it looks like they are just looking up towards the light, and they might not necessarily see the shark. But if there is a larger shark above and they look down, they maybe also won't be able to tell what shark is there or what organism is there, because the top of the shark is dark. So it blends in with the background. That happens a lot in fish. The giant hatchetfish is about 2 times the size of a golf tee. So again, not very big, 2 times the size of a golf tee.
Symone, we have a few questions, if you have time. Speaking of size, Jerry wants to know, why are they small and how do these creatures handle the water pressure?
Yeah, so their bodies are adapted to be able to withstand the pressure, right? So a lot of them are pretty bony. They are always usually pretty small also, so that they can withstand the pressure. They that's why we see a lot of them with those their bodies being translucent. And when we look at a few other ones, you'll see that their bodies don't have a whole lot of fat, like some of the other fish that you might see deeper in the water column. They're able to survive pretty easily. We and lots of other fish would not be able to make it in those areas.
Great, and there's one other question so far. Is the photosynthesis pathway C3 or C4 in the...
And phytoplankton, I see
yes,
that question.
thank you.
I see that question. I don't know, actually. I don't know that answer to that question, actually, but I'll find out. That's a great question. I've never been asked that or ever heard about that before either. Even though we talk about it all the time, but no one has ever mentioned it. So I'll find out, Steve. Is there anything else?
I think that's it for now.
All right, I'll make sure I have the answers to Steve's question in a moment.
I'm sorry, I had a question. What are the 2 types of bioluminescence?
Okay, so some organisms are not actually, the organism itself is not actually bioluminescent. They might have microbials that are living on them, say like a symbiotic relationship with them, and those organisms themselves are bioluminescent. In other cases, they're able to produce
their own bioluminescence.
Yeah.
Now, what are the 2 names called? Because there's 2 names for that. I don't know if you know that.
What are the 2 names of types of bioluminescence?
Yeah, right. Yes.
Okay. So the one where I'm going to make sure that I give you the right one for each one. So the one, yeah, so a lot of them are, like I was saying,
Saprophoros? No.
Mm-mm.
I can't remember the 2 names.
Yeah, so I understand what you're trying to get at, but yeah. Yeah, so maybe are you talking about if it's through a chemical reaction?
I believe it's like a chemical reaction, because one, they produce their own and
light.
the other one they like you said, but I just wasn't sure which one's which, because there's 2 names. But if you can't find it right now, maybe you can email it to one of the professors.
Yeah.
I was just curious.
I can definitely email it, but I wonder, I'm trying to, are you thinking of me like fluorescence and phosphorescence because they are similar?
No.
No? Okay, I don't know. I haven't seen. So when we definitely do talk about the way that they do produce, like you and I just said. I don't know who I'm talking to, and maybe.
Oh, Evangeline.
Yes. So
this is actually my field. So this is what I study the most.
Perfect. Yeah. So I don't know necessarily what the two terms are we're looking for.
Okay.
But we do know that those are the two ways that they produce light.
Okay, I thought there were two names that they use. Okay. I'm sorry to interrupt your lecture. I apologize. I was just curious.
You're totally fine. You're definitely not interrupting.
Symone, we also have some questions about sperm whales.
Yeah, I see.
And how they avoid the bends when they dive so deep and come back up. Yeah.
Yeah. So of course, right? Like this is not true of all of the organisms. Like we were just talking about, most of the ones that live in the very deep ocean are specialized enough that they're able to survive there and only in their area. But the sperm whale, they have always been able to, since they have been able to dive so deeply, they were already adapted so that the pressure wouldn't necessarily harm them. But that doesn't mean they don't go down to the midnight zone. They still stay within the twilight zone. They aren't going down to the midnight zone. So I guess that should probably be clarified, that they are cool that they're able to, go into deeper areas like the twilight zone, but they aren't going so deep where, because if they would go into the midnight zone, they wouldn't be able to survive there either. And there are less organisms there, so their source of prey would be completely wiped out if they did have to go so deep into the midnight zone, because there aren't as many organisms there for such a large animal like the sperm whale.
I have one more question. There's several names for the different types of zones. Like you have the midnight zone, but it's also known as the deep zone or something like that. And for the photic zone, you have the name for like the coastal zone. What is the difference between the photic zone, the coastal zone? I mean, are they all the same zone? Or what's the difference? Or is it because one is close to the coastal, or the other one's more in the open ocean? How does that work?
Yeah, so it's confusing, maybe because they have like multiple names for the same zones. So they have so like they'll have like the midnight zone, which you might see like the aphotic zone. Or benthic, right? Or the trench zone. And what they really do is they collapse into one. So there's another, I'll make sure I give this to Sarah Nella. There's another figure that kind of includes all of those names, and they'll show how they collapse under. So like the trench zone will sit inside of the midnight zone, but just the figure that I chose didn't include them. It didn't break it out because I didn't necessarily break out the organisms that live in each of those smaller zones. But yes, they do collapse under different ones. They're all the same though. They just kind of have like these larger umbrellas, and then you can break up those larger umbrellas into smaller zones.
Is there a way you can email that to one of my professors and show that to me? Because I would really like to know the breakdown of everything, because when I tutor, it's like, it's like, well, which one's which? And it's like, I want to break it down for you, but I don't have that information.
Yeah, I can definitely make sure you get that. So yeah, that's what they really do. It's confusing if you haven't seen like their diagram, but there are definitely ones that make it much more clear, and they'll show you like exactly which zones fit into those larger, like the midnight zone or the benthic zone.
Very cool. Thank you.
Sure.
We have one last question before we continue with your presentation. Jerry was asking that the teeth of one of the organisms that you showed look transparent, and if you know why is that, or what are they made of?
So most of, again, it's the same with most of the other organisms, is that, like, they're transparent because they want to make sure that they are able to hide from their predators or able to sneak up onto their prey. And again, about the light penetration. So that's really why a lot of the organisms in the deep sea are transparent, or might seem like black, but might be able to show some or like expel a different color, which we'll get to in just a moment. But that's why. I'm not sure what their teeth are actually made of, or like if they're made of something different than other organisms. But that is why they are transparent, though. It's the way so that they're able to survive and capture prey and hide from their predators. And it's about the light penetration in the water column when it's that deep, because it's so dark in the deep ocean. I see that people were asking to keep moving. I'll keep going.
Thank you.
No problem. So this one is the deep sea spider.
This creature was found 2,300 feet deep in the ocean. It's a sea spider, and ones living at this depth can grow quite large, spanning almost 3 feet wide. Their 8 long legs help carry vital organs, like their digestive tract. They also have 3 to 4 extra limbs used for cleaning, courtship, and carrying their young. With over 1,300 different species, they are found in every ocean throughout the world.
Okay. And just to make sure I get to the photosynthesis question, because I didn't want to forget, it's that green algae are generally performing C3 photosynthesis, but it's also been suggested recently that they also perform C4 photosynthesis. So it's, I guess, assuming that it's both, but that C3 is more common. And we're now in the midnight zone. So this is the small-toothed dragonfish. This one is 4 times the size of a golf tee. This one can see red light. A lot of the other ones cannot, but this one can see. And this is you can see underneath its eyes right there that it's also being able to exhibit some bioluminescence, and it's because of bacteria that are able to live inside of the fish. And you can see those same sorts of teeth. You can see again that its body is that black, or in some places it might look translucent, but that black color. This is pretty common for almost all of the organisms that live here, except when we get to the hydrothermal vents, we'll start to see some like tube worms and things that look a little bit different, but most of the fish are gonna look like this. This is really cool. This is the chimera that I'm about to show you. And the chimera are actually in the same group as a lot of the other cartilaginous fishes, like sharks and rays. So they don't have bones. They are made out of cartilage. So this is really awesome, I think. They look really weird, though.
This creature was found 4,200 feet deep in the ocean. It's called a chimera. This fish has no bones in its body. Its skeleton is made of cartilage. The dots on its face are sensory organs that detect electrical fields in the water, helping the chimera find its prey. By living in deep water, far from our coasts, the chimera is accustomed to lurking in the dark.
So the chimera is, again, since I was kind of mentioning that it's a cartilaginous fish, exhibits some of the same things that sharks do. And sharks and rays also have an ampulla of Lorenzini, which allows them to sense electrical fields. This is one of the senses that makes them really special. It helps them to find their prey. And it's the same for the chimera. And the chimera, I think, really needed since they are in the deep ocean and since prey items are so hard to come across. So that is one of the special adaptations of the chimera that we see in the deep ocean. And the deep sea shrimp. This one is fun. So it is able to eject a bioluminescent fluid out of its mouth to avoid its prey. So the next slide is going to be, it's going to be like a still shot from like the first video, I think, that I showed. And that's what it looks like. And when it is coming in contact with its predator like this is a still shot from that first video, you can see what exactly is happening. So I think that is really cool to show, right, that this fish, this shrimp, again, red light does not reach the ocean depth. So if there are deep sea animals that are red, they actually appear black. And so they are invisible to the other organisms that are down there. And they are able to expel that bioluminescence fluid to help avoid their predators. A lot of times when organisms do show off some bioluminescent fluid or show off bioluminescence at all, they're doing it to avoid prey, to attract prey, or to like attract a mate. And so this is one of the ways that they do it to avoid prey. And then we'll see with the anglerfish, which is one of the most common ones that I think people have talked about since Finding Nemo came out. We'll see with the anglerfish that they use it to kind of lure their prey in and or to attract a mate. So here's the humpback anglerfish. This one is a carnivore. And they use so this one is a great example of an organism that has symbiotic relationship with algae living in its lure that produces the light to help attract its mate. So this is one of those ones that exhibit that type of bioluminescence. They aren't creating the light themselves, but they have organisms that are there in their body to create the light for them. And this is just a video of the anglerfish.
This creature was found 1,600 feet deep in the ocean. It's an anglerfish, distinguished by the rod protruding from its head that it uses to attract prey. With flexible bones and a stomach that can be expanded, it can swallow fish that are twice its size. The pectoral and pelvic fins can perform as feet, allowing this fish to walk along the bottom of the sea. This strange-looking creature is an example of the bizarre life forms living deep below the surface.
So I think that it's really important to note that, you could see that like the pelvic and pectoral fins were allowing it to walk on the bottom of the seafloor. And we even see that with organisms and fish that live, in coastal habitats, like the sea robin. That's one of the fish that a lot of people see, and their fins allow them to walk on the bottom of the seafloor. So that's not uncommon. It's really cool when you do get to see a fish like that. A lot of times when we look at the sea robin, people catch them often, I think, in the area. And when they do, they might think it's ugly, but I think it's kind of cool that they were able to adapt and modify and their pectoral fins have been modified to help them walk across the bottom and help them to get their prey, since that's where they're just spending a lot of their time. Same with the anglerfish, they're spending a lot of their time on the bottom, not necessarily within the water column, but on the bottom. And so being able to kind of walk across has been able to afford them a little bit more of a benefit. Now, this is the giant squid. The giant squid, one of its eyes is basically as large as a dinner plate. So like it's huge. The reason that there are question marks around depth is because we don't have a really good picture of giant squid and where they live and how long they survive, and they are really hard to come across, and so it's kind of hard to study them. So when we do find them, there are labs that do have giant squid specimens, you know, that they have preserved over time, but it's hard to talk about, you know, exactly, you know, how deep they are able to dive, or exactly, you know, like how big they are able to get, because they are pretty rare. We just haven't studied them enough to make some real claims about that. But the giant squid are awesome. They're huge, and they do live in this midnight zone. I was able to go to a lab years ago, and they had a preserved giant squid, and it was kind of gross. It was amazing though. It was amazing to see just how large an animal like that is, and a little, of course, a little bit scary to think about swimming next to that. And you can see that this is the sperm whale, and you can see that they are able to eat the giant squid. That's awesome. Okay. So this is getting to like the benthic zone. So this is, of course, still part of the midnight zone, right? But we are getting a little bit lower down to the benthic zone, this area over here. And we're gonna start to go into where we see some hydrothermal vents. This fish that we're about to look at is the Bathysaurus. It sounds like a dinosaur, and it might remind you of one, but I think it's a pretty interesting looking fish.
This creature was found 6,900 feet deep in the ocean. It's a deep-sea lizardfish, also called a Bathysaurus ferox. It is the world's deepest living super predator. Anything it meets, it eats, including individuals of its own kind. This frightening creature has both male and female reproductive organs. Razor-sharp fangs can be found on this fish's jaws, and even its tongue, a clear warning to stay away.
So with fangs on its tongue, I think that that's definitely a clear sign to stay away for sure. This is the sea pig. It's a scavenger, so just like any other scavenger, like a crab, they sift through the mud, find like falling detritus. So one thing about the deep ocean, especially now in this benthic zone, is that there's a lot of like marine snow. There's you might start to see some like small parts or like really small pieces of organisms that have passed away or died or been eaten above at different levels above, like when there's like a whale fall, for example, and a lot of organisms eat off of that. And then as time goes on, some of the decaying matter just will end up naturally just keep falling all the way down to the seafloor. And so that's normally what these organisms are eating. 1,000 meters. This is the pelican eel. This can eat, again, similar to the anglerfish and similar to the Bathysaurus. It can eat organisms that are the same size as itself. So look at how large and how wide the mouth is. The jaw is unhinged and the stomach can expand. So the reason that a lot of these organisms like the Bathysaurus, like the anglerfish, like the pelican eel have these abilities is because, again, it's really hard to come across prey. And since that is the case, whatever they get, they want to be able to survive off of it for a while because they might not know when their next meal is coming. So it probably seems like redundant because I know that I just mentioned that with some of the other ones, but it's true. It's really hard to come across prey in the deep ocean. There are really fascinating organisms, like obviously the ones that we're talking about now, but it's still not full or teeming with life as it would be closer to the surface because it's just more harsh conditions here. And now we are at the hydrothermal vents. And so we are going to first watch this video on hydrothermal vents, and then I'll talk a little bit about like why hydrothermal vents are separate or a little bit more of a distinct habitat when it comes to the deep ocean.
The earth cracks open. Fluid and minerals spew from the seafloor. Water shimmers. Life abounds. We're looking at hydrothermal vents, originally discovered near the Galapagos Rift in 1977. Basically, a hydrothermal vent is a hot spring produced by underwater volcanoes or tectonic activity. But what's really cool about them is the abundance and assortment of life that exists there. It's not life like we're used to up here on the surface. It's adapted to the dark conditions of the deep ocean. Organisms that live around hydrothermal vents don't rely on sunlight and photosynthesis. Instead, bacteria and archaea use a process called chemosynthesis to convert minerals and other chemicals in the water into energy. This bacterium is the base of the vent community food web and supports hundreds of species of animals. What kinds of animals? Well, scientists on the NOAA ship Okeanos Explorer went to the rift in 2011. And here's just some of what they saw. Riftia tubeworms, also called giant tubeworms, which can grow to their full size of almost 5 feet long in less than 2 years. Bathymodilus deep sea mussels, which are often the first creatures to colonize the vent, and are able to survive for a short time after the vent is inactive. Serpulid, or feather duster worms, and Tevnia tubeworms, which are often the food of choice for vent crabs, the top predator of the vent community. But it's not all animals down there. Researchers also saw white flocculent material erupting from the vents like a snowblower, an indicator of microbial life beneath the seafloor. And of course, there were fresh lava flows, which means the seafloor is continuing to change. And that change means there's always more to learn.
So he talked about chemosynthesis a little bit, and it's a process where bacteria use chemical energy to produce carbohydrates, and that's how they're able to survive. So we're not using photosynthesis down here, obviously, because the sunlight doesn't penetrate this deep. So in hydrothermal vents, these tube worms are able to survive this way. And so they have no mouth and no digestive tract, but they're huge, right? They were talking about them being, 5 feet. That's pretty big, I think. Before we finish I'll go to the yeti crab because I think they mentioned that, but after it, I'm gonna just show you the demo for something that you can do if you want to kind of like see how a hydrothermal vent works. And so this is the yeti crab. It looks interesting, lots of hair. It also consumes bacteria, so it's not eating any of the other organisms down there. So they call them the bacteria farmers. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and instead show you the activity so that you can, if you want, I need to bring my camera back a lot. You don't need to see me, but you can just see what happens in this here container. So this is really cold water. And then this is a jar, a little glass bottle. So you can put a couple of drops of food coloring in here. I didn't have food coloring, and I've done this experiment a couple of times, and we did it in the NOAA Ocean Today show when we were talking about the deep ocean before. And I actually used some blue Kool-Aid. So I want to make sure that like whenever I do activities, I show people things that are accessible for everyone. So if you don't have food coloring, you can use like turmeric or some other seasoning that has a pretty like deep color, or you can use like a Crystal Light or Kool-Aid kind of powder if you have that. And then if you have hot water, you want to pour your hot water into this smaller bottle that you have. So I'm just gonna pour mine in here. I'm making a mess, but it's okay. So I'm not gonna fill it like necessarily all the way to the top, but you are able to see it. And then you want to be careful because now this bottle is pretty hot. So you want to take it, and I'm going to use these tongs, and we're going to put it into the cold waters. So this is representing the deep ocean. And when we're talking about hydrothermal vents and how they were created, so you'll start to see the warm water is going to rise out. So this represents how what happens in a hydrothermal vent, that hot water that comes from the earth, that part of the earth that is able to produce a vent, that starts to rise, and you now have a hydrothermal vent in a bottle. It's obviously not necessarily the same thing, but it's a pretty cool activity. It's really quick, it's really visual, so people are able to learn and see just how fast this is able to happen. The key is to make sure you have really cold water and really warm water. So I just had some water that I warmed up and just put it into my thermos here, and you can try it at home, or you can pass it on to someone else to try if you would like. And there were probably a few more slides, but I think the last slide was just like a slide of some resources. So I don't have to worry about necessarily going back to the slideshow. I can answer some questions instead, if that makes sense, if that works. And so I'm fine with that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. I think where we've left off is Jerry has some questions beginning with why are the bacteria bioluminescent?
So it's to serve the purpose, so that they are able to survive. It's a symbiotic relationship. So they're able to survive. They're able to survive during by living with those organisms like the anglerfish. So for the anglerfish to want them to live there, they have to kind of bring something to the table. So what they bring to the table is that they're able to produce light, and that helps to benefit the anglerfish.
Great. And she also wanted to know, what does the giant squid eat?
The giant squid. So the giant squid is also a carnivore. And if you ever look at the giant squid, or like an octopus, or any of those organisms, you see like that they have like a pretty decent beak. And so they are definitely carnivores. They're eating other fish for sure. And since they live so deep, they're going to be trying to consume, again, as much as they can. They are eating lots of other fish. I'm not sure, I don't think they eat other squid though, because they are so big. I'm not sure that they are eating like other giant squid. They might eat some of their other smaller organisms.
Okay, great. And
oh, I love this question.
Go ahead.
I see a question that I actually really love. I'm sorry. So this one is the possibility of the origin of life from hydrothermal vents. So this is something that I think is really fascinating. In more recent, and this is something that we were just talking about as we were preparing for the show that I was mentioning about space and about the ocean. So in like geological terms, like we just recently were able to have like more multi-celled organisms on this planet. A lot of them started out with just like singular celled organisms, and like the ones that we are seeing in hydrothermal vents, a lot of microbials. And so that is kind of the basis that they are using when they talk about space and life on other planets. And if there is, if there's water, or if there are, yes, if there's water, the chances that there is life like on another planet is like they aren't questioning if there is, they just want to know like what it is. Like they know that there is definitely going to be life there. And so, yes, I think that, Lynn, you are on par when talking about, the origin of life kind of coming from, I'm not sure if that necessarily comes from hydrothermal vents, but I do see that the research is definitely pointing, in the direction of helping people to see that those single-celled or microbial organisms, or organisms that maybe don't don't need oxygen, that those are like the origin of life. And from there, then we're able to, kind of move up and get the kinds of organisms that we now see in the ocean. So I think you might be onto something, for sure. And as far as I'm concerned, or as far as I know, they call it a lizardfish, but I'm pretty sure it's considered a true fish, though. But I do know that it's probably, I'm thinking that it's because it is so, because it's so old. It's similar to like how, sharks are the same way in that, they've been on the planet, before dinosaurs were even on the planet. So they have, evolved to survive. That's why we see so many different types and species of sharks, and sharks that live, like in rivers, like a bull, that or can survive, like the bull shark, versus ones that live in the open ocean, versus ones that live in at the bottom of the ocean. So I think it's along those same lines that because they like originated and like arrived on this planet so long ago, but I don't necessarily know that they aren't a true fish. Y'all, I love these questions. So like when we do these usually, or we being like me, when I work with Noah, when we do these, we normally give like a really like kind of like broad overview of the different types of organisms, but I've never studied like each of these species. But I do think that they're so cool that I always want to find out more about each of them. So I feel like now I'm going to be like studying the Bathysaurus, or looking to learn more about some of the ones that I don't know as much about. So thanks for asking these questions.
I have several questions actually. Do the different species of anglerfish, do they always have the male attached to them?
No, I don't think that we saw that in the one that we looked at just now.
I was just curious, because that one is a very unusual, because it actually has webbed feet where it can walk on the ground. And that's the only one of the anglerfish that we know of so far. Is that correct?
I don't know if that's the only one, but that is just the one that we ended up showing that particular time. So not all of them are attached, though. I know that is not all of them are attached. Not all species.
Also, Symone, Jerry had a question about the vent creatures. Do you know if they are adapted to hot temperatures or the cold, or both?
Both. So that's really interesting about the vent creatures. So close to the vent, it is really it's warm. Because of the hot water that comes out. I'm sorry, I'm just burping this water. It's warm, but surrounding the vent though, the water is cold. But they normally don't leave the vent habitat. So they normally are staying like right in the same area as the vent.
Great.
That's why if you were listening, they were saying that if the vent like no longer exists, there are some of those organisms that are still able to survive for a period of time after the event has kind of like shut down. But they normally aren't able to like venture out and go on and into the surrounding water if they are adapted to, or living in a hydrothermal vent. That's why it's more of like a specific habitat, and why it isn't separated out.
That makes me question though, how how long lived are these vents? Do we know?
Yeah, so hydrothermal vents are pretty interesting. I think that I wonder how long lived, or like how long do they last, or like how long do they last, Nella? So I don't know if they have if all of them have like a short lifespan. I would say that from what we've seen, they were able to go back to vents, after a couple of years. But I don't know how long all of them, if there's like a kind of structured time frame for all of them. But yeah, so that's what I thought. So yeah, vents definitely originated a long time ago, but they are like relatively short-lived. So they don't necessarily last forever. I do know that I know people who have gone to study hydrothermal vents, and they've been able to kind of like return to see them. But it's not like they're out there for, decades. I thought so. They can remain active. Interesting.
Thank you very much. And that takes us to 8 o'clock. So if we have maybe 1 or 2 questions, and Symone is gracious enough to entertain them, and now is your last chance. If you haven't asked a question until this point, and you have a burning desire to learn something about the deep sea, this is your chance.
There's perfect. I'm just gonna type into the chat, so you all, if you're interested in learning about the intersection with space and Europa and the deep sea, I'm just gonna put in the chat a link to like a free webinar that is happening on Friday, I think, where they'll be able to talk about some of those things.
Fantastic.
Sure.
Thank you so much.